Hi, my name is Dr. Ashley Molin, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and the Associate Director of Behavioral Health at Center on Halsted, which is the Midwest's largest and most comprehensive LGBTQ center. And there, one of my primary job responsibilities is running our clinical training program, which trains graduate students in all types of mental health fields. One of the activities I do with them every year is called the Social Identity Profile. And I can't take full credit for this. I got it from a colleague of mine, Dr. Crystal Canning-Carroll. And it adapts the Hayes addressing model to help students think about their various master statuses and how they might show up with clients. You can also totally do this as a clinical tool with individual clients, but I've primarily used it in a training setting. So you can see it up on my screen here. The ones that have like the bold and underline, that's the original addressing model. And then there are a couple that we've added and a blank that we have at the bottom. So the blank that we have at the bottom, we always encourage students to put in maybe a category of identity that we've forgotten. That's actually how we've gotten things like body type and size, political orientation, and relationship status that we've added over the years to make sure that we're really capturing as many master statuses as possible. I give very little instruction when I give this out to the students. I let them know that they won't have to turn it in and they won't have to share the information with anyone unless they choose to, though we will have a discussion about it. This is really meant to be a tool to get them thinking about all of these different parts of their identity. And beyond that, I kind of let them have at it. Part of the reason I do this is that I don't want to bias them or encourage them to come up with particular words for their group membership, what they would name their identity. And this keeps it interesting because different groups will come up with different things. I think age is a really great example of this. Sometimes students will get really into whatever their particular generation is called, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, what have you. Sometimes they'll talk about their specific age or if they consider themselves young, middle age, or older. Some will come up with multiple words, and that sort of gives us a lot of grist for the mill and sort of talking about how do we define our group membership in any of these identities. Then you'll notice there are some columns going across the top, and it asks whoever's filling it out to place an X next to the social identities that answer the question for each of the columns. So which identities are they most aware of? Which identities do they think about the least? Are there identities they want to know more about or that they feel like has the strongest effect on their personal life? Where do they feel like they have power and privilege in society? What has the greatest effect on how those around you see you? And then do they consider that identity to be visible or invisible to others? And part of what ends up being really interesting about this is seeing the way in which the check marks fall for different students. So for example, do you check something that both gives you power and privilege in society, but is also an invisible identity? And what does that intersection mean? It also gets students talking and thinking about how these identities show up with clients. And those are often a lot of the questions that we'll ask when we have the discussion afterwards. So usually I start with just a broad question of like, tell me about how it felt to fill this out. What sort of reactions did you have? What sort of thoughts did you have? What came up for you? And then going through and thinking about like, were you surprised by any of the social identities? Were there any that you had a hard time coming up with a word or a membership for? And were you surprised by where you placed X's? How do you see those interacting? And the nice thing is that this then leads into a really deep and rich conversation about how do you think the way you show up in the room might impact your clinical work? What would it be like if clients have the same identities as you? What will it be like if clients have different identities? And then also, how is that going to impact your training year? What's it like to look around the room and recognize that people may have invisible identities, your cohort members, fellow other staff members, that impact the way that they see the world and the way that they see the clinical work that they're doing? We usually take 90 minutes for this, and we have cohorts that range from like 5 to 10 people. And we often fill that time with absolutely no problem. I think it can generate a ton of really great discussion. In addition to doing this in the clinical training program, I've also used it in teaching diversity. And I think this can be a good introduction for students who maybe haven't thought about these master statuses before, because it's something that can be done individually and gives the student a place to reflect before they have an open conversation with their classmates or with a professor. I think it creates a little bit more safety for them to start labeling these master statuses for themselves and really thinking about where do they hold power and privilege and how might other people perceive them because of that. So I hope this is something that you find helpful and that you feel like maybe you can use in your own practice, either in classes, in training, or with your clients. Thanks so much.